A sudden end for one of Yemen's most powerful men. Houthi rebels say they killed ousted President Abdullah Saleh during an attack on his convoy in Sanaa. His remains were packed on the back of a pickup truck. In a televised statement, the leader of the Houthis said Saleh was involved in a conspiracy with the Saudi-led coalition to take over Sanaa.
What are the reasons behind this new transfer to the other side? Suddenly you talk to the aggressors against your own people?
Saleh had been in an alliance with the Iranian-backed Houthis for more than 2 years. Together, they controlled the capital, Sanaa, and fought against the Saudi-led coalition, which supports the internationally recognized government led by Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi. But this partnership with the Houthis collapsed last week, sparking major confrontations between Saleh's forces and the rebels. After days of running street battles, Saleh announced he was ready for dialogue with the Saudi-led coalition if it ended its blockade of Yemen's ports and airports and allowed for more humanitarian aid.
Yemen is already a failed state. It's a state where there is no central government. The institutions have failed. Most of the structures have failed. The economy has failed. The war has further destroyed the entire country. So I think in the short run, we are in for a lot more violence.
Saleh and the Houthis pushed out Hadi's government in January 2015 and set up their own administration, prompting the Saudi-led campaign against them. Since then, the country has been split between the Houthi rebels in the north, Hadi's administration in the south, and forces loyal to Saleh. When fighting began among the former allies, it sparked fears of a new front in the war, a war which has already killed nearly 10,000 people, pushed Yemen to the brink of mass starvation, and triggered what the United Nations has called the world's worst humanitarian crisis.
There have been multiple investigations about the atrocities being committed in Yemen. All parties are guilty, whether it's the Houthis, whether it's the Saudi-led coalition. And, the UK and the US are largely complicit in this war as well, through the billions and billions of dollars worth of arms sales to the Saudis.
As Yemen's president, Saleh ruled for more than 3 decades until he was forced to resign during the Arab Spring uprising. But he was able to remain in the country and continued to wield enormous power behind the scenes. It's not yet clear what his death will mean for the fighting on the ground or Yemen's future.
Now, the Saudi-led intervention in Yemen began as a response to the Houthi takeover of Sanaa and the group's advance across the country. But who is this group? How did it get so powerful? And what do these rebels want? Let's take a closer look.
The Houthi movement was started in the 1990s by this man, Hussein al-Houthi, a former MP in Yemen and a Zaydi religious scholar from one of the most powerful families in Saada province. The Houthis say Zaydis, that's a sect of Shia Islam only found in Yemen, have been marginalized, and that Salafism has been allowed to spread, and that the Yemeni government has been too pro-American. But their opponents say the Houthis want to take Yemen back to the days before 1962, when only the Sayyid class, who were believed to have a divine right, ruled. And they're backed by Iran, a sort of Yemeni equivalent to Lebanon's Hezbollah. The Houthis fought 6 wars against former President Abdullah Saleh between 2004 and 2010. In the first, Hussein al-Houthi was killed and replaced by his brother Abdul Malik. They then joined the 2011 uprising against President Saleh, but with his support, launched a coup against Saleh's replacement, Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, in 2014 and took over the capital, Sanaa. They fought the Salafis, the Islah Party, Hadi, fighters in Ta'ez who resisted their advance, southern separatists, and Al-Qaeda. And peace deal after peace deal has broken down. So what do they want? And how can any peace deal last?
Let's rejoin Obay Shabandar here in the studio for some further analysis on what's happened. I'd like to kind of pick up where you left off. I had asked where all of these developments in just the last hours actually leaves the wider conflict, particularly, Obay, considering that Yemen is facing arguably the worst humanitarian crisis on the planet right now.
Absolutely. One of the deals that Saleh was willing to make with the Saudi-led coalition was in return for him to end the cross-border attacks and to stop the Houthi missiles being launched against Saudi Arabia, that in return, he was asking for the coalition to end the blockade of Sana'a airport and the Hodeidah seaport, where the majority of the food would reach the areas of Yemen that are still controlled by the Houthi rebel forces. So one of the consequences of the Houthis killing Saleh is that that deal is certainly off the table. I think we can certainly expect for Sana'a and for the Hodeidah port, the airport to still remain blockaded. And that spells, that's a very difficult situation for the people of Yemen. It's very difficult for them to get food, to get much needed medicine. We're seeing a cholera outbreak. We're seeing malnutrition. As always, the civilians are the first ones to bear the brunt of this type of fighting, with the Sana'a airport being closed, with a renewed round of fighting around the capital and around the areas that the Houthis control after the assassination or after the killing of Saleh. At the end of the day, the Houthis may have gotten the upper hand, but the Yemeni people are still suffering the consequences of this war that's almost 3 years until today.
Indeed. And when you say it's almost 3 years to today, and you say that this will almost definitely prolong the conflict even further, I mean, how much more can Yemen actually take? This is one of the poorest country in the Arab world, facing, as we said, the worst humanitarian crisis arguably on the planet right now. What is left, what will be left to fight for in Yemen if this continues at the level it's continuing at?
Well, it's such a common story, sadly, in the Middle East, from what we've seen in Syria with the destruction there and what we're seeing the destruction in Yemen. Millions are facing potential starvation. Over 10,000 have been killed. Over 50,000, if not more, have been injured. Many of the civilians are suffering just horrendous injuries that require significant medical attention. And the first victims are actually the children, the elderly and the women who need this medical support the most. How much more suffering can the Yemen people handle to this day? Sadly, I think we won't find out until a final peace resolution is found for this horrible conflict in Yemen. With Saleh out the picture, with the Houthis in a renewed position of confidence and power over the capital, doesn't seem that any side, whether the Houthis or the Saudi-led coalition and the Hadi government, is going to sit down at the negotiating table to end this horrible conflict. Millions are vulnerable, millions are facing potential starvation, and this killing of Saleh by the Houthis, sadly, I think brings us back to square one.